us. So if you're hosting a session and all of a sudden you see your collaborative notes doc changes a lot from one day to the next, that's because our folks in Australia just watched your session and wanted to contribute to that. So would love your feedback on how that works for you all, both in Australia and here, but we're excited to have that and just want to welcome everyone. So to start out our meetings, it's really important that we do a land acknowledgement and we understand the history of the place where we are. One of the things I love most about traveling to meetings is the ability to come to a new place, to learn about a new place, to learn about the history of that place. For our land acknowledgement this year, our staff decided to do something a little bit different. There is a QR code here that will give you resources. There is a local shop that is Indigenous owned. There are parks, there are museums. The Indigenous community here in the Pacific Northwest is very strong. They are very active. They are here with us today, and I encourage you to explore and learn more about them in your time that you are here. With that, I will acknowledge that this meeting takes place on the unceded ancestral lands of the coastal Salish peoples and nations. This land was taken from them, often through force and through colonization. They are still here today, and I am proud that the work in the ESIP community continues to work with Indigenous communities around the world in our work to make sure that their voices, their data, their practices are present in all the work that we do. ESIP is guided by our community participation guidelines. This is a very important part of our community. This QR code will give you the link to our community participation guidelines. These reference our behavior in person and online. They outline expected and unacceptable behaviors. If at any time during this week or throughout the year you experience treatment in the ESIP community that you feel does not follow these guidelines, we want to know about it. We have a reporting form online, or you can also reach out to anyone with an orange staff name badge or board to let us know how to address those situations. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce ESIP's current board president, Denise Hills, to continue with our welcome.
It is so good to see everybody here in person, and I look forward to seeing everybody online in the next few days. One of my great pleasures in my tenure as president is that we've been, and my time on the board, is we've been rolling out, we rolled out a new mission, vision, and values for ESIP. This was community-driven, and Susan led some really great efforts for us to come together with this. And so our vision, and I want us to keep this in mind this week and throughout the year as we continue our work with ESIP, is a world where data-driven solutions are really a reality for all by making earth science data actionable by all who need them anytime, anywhere. I mean, that to me really sums up why I am here and why I hope most of you are here as well. Our mission is to empower innovative use and stewardship of earth science data to solve our planet's greatest challenges. And all of this is underlain by our core values. This is really what drives us. Integrity, inclusiveness, collaboration, openness, curiosity. All of this is what drives us to do what we do. I could, and our community participation guidelines, which Susan referenced, come out of these values. So I think that's a great way to connect everybody. Yeah. I want to acknowledge that this meeting would not happen, and a lot of things in ESIP would not happen without our absolutely amazing staff here. Susan has already introduced herself as our current executive director. Unfortunately for ESIP, but luckily for Chesapeake Conservancy, Susan will be leaving us very soon. I have greatly enjoyed her time here, and ESIP would not be the amazing place it is without her leadership. I would also like to let you all know that we have been very considerate about this transition, And I would like Mark Persons to stand up in case you don't know who he is. Mark is here. And Mark is going to help us bridge this transition as our interim director as we conduct our search for a full-time executive director in the next few months. I would also like to acknowledge Patty Allen, who I don't think is in the room right now. I think she's probably out at the registration desk. Be sure to say hi to her and thank her for all the amazing work she does. Alicia Kroll, if she's in the room, stand up. She's back there. She is our community director and is doing great things already. Zoe, is Zoe in the room? I think she's also at registration. Zoe Gentis, be sure to say hi to her. And Aaron, is Aaron in the room? I think the reason they're not here is, oh, is he there? Oh, there he is. Yeah, they are doing so much behind the scenes. It's really amazing. And again, these meetings don't happen, and our day-to-day operations don't happen without this amazing staff. Other people, if you have questions, comments, or concerns during the week, be sure to reach out to staff, but they're also very busy. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to our current board. Any of our current board members who are in the room, could you stand up and just kind of do a little wave if you are able? Current boarding and program committee. These are all really amazing volunteers. We get a lot of thanks, but we don't always get much else, but we do a lot of really great work. And I have enjoyed working with each and every one of you for my time on the board. It is also a time of transition for the board. We do have a few people who are coming in on our board. If you are going to be part of our board or program committee after the end of this week and you didn't stand up before, go ahead and stand up. I'm not sure if any of those are in the room. There we go, yes. Excellent, yes, great. They also have a lot of knowledge of ESIP and are excited to be serving you. And what are you excited about for this week? Let me tell you a little bit about what I'm excited about. ESIP meetings, to me, ESIP meetings and collaboration area meetings, all of that, I feel like ESIP is a place where I get things done. It's always amazing to me. I am so excited to be able to make more connections with people, to meet new people, to make those new connections, to reestablish and strengthen the old connections I have. And this meeting may look different than a lot of the ones that we've had recently. I love seeing this packed room. I love seeing all the people online. There's more people online than we may have typically had in the past. And that really speaks to me because my very first ESIP back in 2013, I attended as a virtual participant when that was not common. I was one of just a handful, maybe 5 of us were virtual participants at that meeting, yet I was welcomed, included. People were proactive about making sure I was engaged. I want to see that continue. I know you all are going to do that because this is a different, ESIP does meetings right. Let's keep doing that and keep building those connections. Virtual, in person. I'm very excited about our Australia colleagues and to see how that works. So let that excitement of the connections really guide you for this week. And with that, I will pass this back to Susan.
So there's another group of people that I want to recognize and make sure that you all see this week and that you meet them, and that is ESIP's 2025 class of Community Fellows. Could the Community Fellows stand up for me, please? So for those of you who are new to ESIP, you can sit down. For those of you who are new to ESIP, our Community Fellows, we could not run this meeting without them. Hands down, couldn't do it. Running a hybrid meeting is incredibly hard and takes a lot of work and a lot of smart people. But they are not just your IT helpers in your sessions, okay? These are our next generation of earth science informatics professionals, right? They each have their own research, they each have their own career ambitions. It was a very competitive process to select them. So I encourage you to meet them and to connect with them, to ask them about their research, to ask them about where they're looking to take their careers. It is my goal that they have the most supercharged networking this week, and I know that you will not let me down in that regard in connecting with them. So I have about 1,000 things I want to cover with you all in about 2 minutes. So forgive me if I go really quickly. As you know, with my transitions in the administration, all kinds of change going on in the world, ESIP really wants to hear from you. Alicia Krall, our new community director, she hit the ground running and came in and identified that we hadn't done a comprehensive community needs assessment in a long time. This is the information we need to get from the community to make sure ESIP continues to be community-led, community-driven, right? Right now, we put it out in the ESIP update, we've had 43 people reply. There are way more than 43 people whose voices we need to hear. So this survey, we have extended it, is open through the week, it will close on Friday. Some of the answers will be used in one of the sessions this week. We really want to hear from you about how your world is changing, how your work is changing, and what you need from ESIP to be the best that you can be. So please, I urge you to complete the community needs assessment. We've had lots of questions about the bingo card. This is very important stuff, people, very important. I know that we're all a friendly group, but there are a lot of introverts among you. So we try and help you with the networking a little bit. By the, where you picked up your name badges, where the stickers were, there are bingo cards. We're trying to do something different this year. So you've all played bingo before. I don't think I need to explain the rules. You need to get 5 in a row. So look at the different things that are on the bingo card. This one for here, like served on the ESIP board, owns a pet, not a cat or a dog, works for ESIP, right? So you go around with your bingo card, you get people to initial in the box that they fit. And then when you have completed it, drop it off at the registration desk. There will be chocolate for you there, I promise. And then we will have all of those who finish a bingo card on Friday at our closing plenary. We have some bigger Seattle-themed gifts that we will draw for. So you will meet people and you will get chocolate and maybe a prize. What's not to love? I want to thank the sponsors for our meeting. This meeting, this year especially, is very challenging. I will go into it more on Friday. We will likely lose money on this meeting, but it is absolutely worth it to bring you all together to do what we do. We simply could not do it without sponsors, and so I want to thank our sponsors who have generously stepped up to support us. We have 3 silver level sponsors. We have the Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative. This initiative provides open access to sustainability data on AWS to help accelerate earth science research and innovation. I encourage you to check out the QR code that takes you right to their resources. If you don't snap it right now, it is in our rotating slide deck by registration as well. Really grateful for AWS and Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative support over the years, both in cloud credits for the lab and in financial support. Want to thank our other silver sponsor. Our sustainability sponsor is Element 84. They have been a long-standing sponsor of ESIP. You will notice your lanyards. We didn't have to buy new lanyards this year, right? And so at the end of the meeting, if you give those back, we will reuse them again and again. And Element 84 is always pushing us to look at ways to decrease the carbon footprint of our meeting. I recently went to some other meetings and there's this signage everywhere and you walk into the lobby and it's just splashed ESIP everywhere. A lot of that stuff is disposable, right? The reason we don't have big signage everywhere is that we see it as wasteful, right? The reason we don't have ribbons on our name tags, we do stickers instead and we print on it, is it's less plastic that goes out there. So Element 84 has been a great partner over the years in helping us think through ways to increase the sustainability of our meetings. And this is a QR code here to subscribe to their newsletter. And then our last silver sponsor is Esri, another amazing longstanding partner of ESIP. Lorraine is here in person, which, I mean, she just came from the Esri UC, I'm certain of it, and probably many of you did also. We always back up to the Esri User Conference, which is such an amazing event. I'm pleased we're here on the West Coast this year, making that trip just a little shorter for Lorraine and her team. They have been great supporters of us over the years, and Lorraine also chairs the Open Science Cluster as well. So you can learn more about Esri products at that QR code, which is also in the rotating slide deck. And a few other sponsors I need to thank. Oops. There we go. SSAI is a coffee break sponsor. We know you guys love your coffee, and we really appreciate them coming forward with that. AGU has been a longstanding sponsor of our research showcase, and that will be on Wednesday evening. And iSciences also is a sponsor at the Friend level, and we really appreciate their support as well. If you know of other companies that could sponsor ESIP, please let Mark and I know. This is really critical as federal resources are becoming more scarce. So we're always looking to grow this area for our sponsors. So now I'm going to walk you through your week, right? There is a lot going on. Some of you who have been here for many years, you know the drill. Help bring the newcomers along. Sched is your place for in-person meeting, building your schedule. You can click the QR code. That will take you to Sched, where you can select your sessions. It tells you where the sessions are. We also will help orient you to get you around. If you are online, your hub for the meeting is KikoChat, right? It is a separate platform that you should be able to log into with the same email address you had in Sched. People in the room, if you need to go up to your hotel room for a little bit, you can log in through KikoChat. That's where all the Zoom links for the rooms will be. That's where the collaborative notes documents will be, the links to Miro and Slido and all those things. So we have two tools that seem to have served us well over the years. So today, after our plenary, after some breakout sessions, just a couple key events I want to highlight for today. We have our newcomers meet and greet at 1 o'clock, and that is going to be, it says Madison Ballroom, second floor. I think we wanted AV for that, so we're moving it to the Frontier breakout room, which is just behind us here. It's in Sched, that's where it's current. So grab your lunch at 12:30, eat your lunch. We like to bring the first-time attendees together so you can get to know in a little bit smaller setting, get to know each other, get to know a little bit more about ESIP. That is also online as well. We will have Zoom for that session, so for folks online, please also join that. This evening, we wanted to do something fun. I don't know that we've done this before, but we are going to the Mariners game. We have tickets in section 327. You need to buy your own ticket to join us, but the first pitch is at 6:40 tonight. The weather's going to be beautiful. Wear your ESIP t-shirts, and we're just going to have a great time at the ball game. The Mariners are playing the Brewers, if that's of interest. I just want to go to a ball game. Tomorrow evening, we have our research showcase. That will be at 5:30, right out here where the breakfast was set up. We will have light refreshments, and great chance to connect with people and talk with them about their research. And then Wednesday evening, we're continuing what we did last year with our Dine Around dinners. So Dine Around dinners is a chance for you to get together in small groups of people, with people maybe you don't already know, and go have dinner somewhere around Seattle. Charlie Haley, our wonderful local facilitator, has curated a list of reservations for you. You just go into the Google Sheet, you add your name, you join that group for dinner. It was really popular in Asheville, so we wanted to bring that back. If all the spots fill up, figure out what restaurant you want to go to, make a reservation. It's a Google Sheet, add it to the bottom, and people will join you. It's magic. On Thursday, we will have our unconference session. So unconference is the idea that between the time that we had our call for sessions and today, a lot's changed in the world, right? The key issues that were important to you then, maybe you didn't think to propose a session, but you've got a topic you want to really urgently talk with people about. We can submit unconference ideas at registration. We'll post them up there so people can see them. We will do 2-minute pitches so everybody can hear what those conversations are, and then we will assign you to different rooms. For those of you online, we're trying to do the unconference for virtual participants as well this year. We will need our virtual participants to vote on which topics they want so that we are sure to assign the most popular virtual topics to rooms that have AV, because sometimes we have more topics than we have rooms and microphones and all of that. So bear with us as we try to evolve that a little bit. On Thursday evening, we have our Funding Friday poster making. And the poster making, it always gets ahead of the event, so I have to explain Funding Friday. Funding Friday is our last morning of the meeting on Friday. We do essentially a pitch fest, where you can pitch ideas to receive micro funding to advance those ideas. So to get you ready for that, on Thursday night, we have a poster making session. This is low tech here, folks. It is not PowerPoint, it is not flashy, no YouTube videos. It is markers and flip charts. You sketch out your idea. We have a category for teachers because we have our teacher workshop going on simultaneously. And then we have students and teachers, and then we have our regular attendee section, right? Different amounts of funding for those two categories. They will make their pitches on Friday morning. You all as attendees get to vote, and you decide which ideas ESIP will fund for the coming year. We've had some great projects come out of Funding Friday. So Thursday night is the poster making. We'll gather in the lobby bar. And I encourage those of you, even if you don't have an idea to pitch, come and encourage and support those who do. Ask them about their ideas. Connect them with other people who could help further their idea to make it even stronger. And then, like I said, Friday morning, we do those pitches. We do them with breakfast here before our closing sessions. And then our closing plenary on Friday is actually open to all. So if you know someone who couldn't get registration to this meeting, the ESIP community calendar has the link to our Friday plenary. It is open to all. This is our annual business meeting. I will talk to you about the state of ESIP, where we are going, and then like last year, we did an interactive exercise. We will be breaking out in the room and online to get your feedback on various scenarios for ESIP moving forward. This is a really important and powerful session. I know that Friday, the weekend is calling and attendance can trickle off, but I really encourage you to stay fully engaged throughout the week. So that brings me back to today. So I've run you through the week really quickly, and it is now my pleasure to talk about our opening plenary. So our theme for this year is innovation to impact. And with that, we invited our plenary speakers thinking along those lines. We are going to start with Brianna Pagan. I was excited to invite Brianna for so many different reasons. I'll introduce her in a moment. And then she will be followed by Professor Xander Wang, who is this year's AGU Falkenberg Award recipient. Many of you know ESIP co-sponsors the Falkenberg Award, and we're thrilled to have Dr. Wang with us here to present his work to you as well. So we're going to start with Brianna, and I was so excited to have her come and speak to the ESIP community. Many of you know her, but when there's 5 sessions going on at once, you might miss, you can't go to all 5 sessions. And Brianna has had a long and varied career, most recently with NASA, and she is now with Development Seed. I love that she has made the transition from federal service to private sector, which I think a lot of people are considering or looking at or wondering about. She also has an excellent technical background, and she also experienced the recent wildfires in California firsthand. So I know that she has a lot of relevant stories to tell and share with you all, and I'm excited to turn over the floor to Brianna.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Susan. And I just want to reiterate how happy that I am that this ESIP is actually happening. ESIP was one of the first conferences that I attended when I had joined NASA, and it always really stuck with me, most importantly because of the community feeling, but I think it's just a great sized group of people to be able to connect with and learn from each other. And so, being able to come back and give this plenary, I'm really excited and happy to be here. I want to start by saying that I'm just going to be talking to you as a person and sharing a personal story. I was looking at, the description of what the focus of this ESIP is about, innovation to impact, And I wanted to give a perspective around resilience and how resilience can play into innovation and actually getting towards what we all want to do, which is having, a big impact. Not sure this is working. Oh, there we go. Okay, so like I said, I'm just coming to you as a person first and foremost, but I did recently leave NASA at my own free will, thank goodness, and joined Development Seed a few months ago, where I'm still working primarily on NASA-focused projects. I'm working on a project called VEDA, which is a visualization, exploration, and data analysis tool for NASA. But I'm also heavily involved in other very relevant ESIP activities. I'm a board member of the Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation. We have Jed Sudmal, who's the executive director of that, coming and giving a talk at the end of the week. I think CNG is another great community, and I'm happy for you all to get up to date on what's going on with CNG. I'm also active in Pangeo, and I co-chair the OGC steering working group on GeoZar, where we're essentially trying to make a geospatial specification for the ZAR data format, which is very important as we have more and more companies and data providers switching to cloud-native geospatial formats like ZAR. I'm also an adjunct professor at Loyola Marymount University. I teach classes in climate resilience, and before entering this world of cloud-native geospatial activities and sort of big data, I have a very typical science background where I studied hydrology. My first job was at a local water department in Los Angeles, where I was doing water conservation activities, basically trying to get people to swap out their toilets to more efficient toilets. And when I was working that job, I felt a little bit kind of discouraged of, is this going to be my life? I just work at one little city and try to get people to swap out their shower heads, and it felt really small. And so I ended up, transitioning to research and looking at climate modeling and trying to understand how is climate change going to impact water resources security, and eventually got a little fed up with that too. It felt like, I think it was Dr. Elizabeth Anna Johnson who says, when you do climate change science, it can feel like you're writing obituaries to Earth. And I also felt that way. I thought, I'm not contributing to any new science, especially in the Western US. We've known these water issues for a while. How can I pivot to something more relevant and now and today? And I found myself thrown into the world of satellite remote sensing. And it was under the promise that satellites are going to democratize science, and give equal access to data worldwide. And I found that just fascinating. A few years later, trying to transition my career to be more of a science enabler, I sit in that seat now. Right? I don't do a lot of domain research anymore. I consider myself a person who's just trying to help scientists and the experts actually get to the data. And I think that's what a lot of us here at ESIP are also really passionate about. So like I said, I'm just here to tell you a story. And with this in mind, I want you to look at the theme this year, innovation and impact. And I think these are some great questions that were posed by the ESIP staff of, who are our end users? Where in the process can they help us innovate? How does earth science data empower communities? How does our work lead to and actually demonstrate real value? How do we demonstrate real value? And I want you to keep those questions kind of in the back of your head as I'm telling you this personal story. So I'd be remiss to not also add a little bit about who I am. I'm a native Angelino. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I live in the Santa Monica Mountains on Chumash land, and I'm a big runner. I'm an ultra runner. That is how I met my partner. Our actual third date was running a local trail called Backbone in the Santa Monica Mountains. It's a 70-mile route. And that's what we love and connect over. I love the Santa Monica Mountain regions. And it's if you haven't visited, it's kind of no question that this region is also incredibly susceptible to climate change. So the specific towns that I'm in is between Topanga and Malibu, and we are infamously known for having fires, floods, mudslides, et cetera. And we've been highlighted, I think, quite a few times in the news over, our little town and what we've experienced. And the term, resilience comes up, and I want to tell you you the story about resilience. And this is very much focused around climate resilience, but just looking at this definition of resilience, it's the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. And ironically, I've taught this in universities, and I have been thinking a lot of my work is relevant to climate resilience, but it's really taken a whole new meaning now because we lost our home in the Palisades fire earlier this year in January. These are photos of our little cottage. It was a little cottage that was built in the 1940s. This was my first time back on the property 25 days after the fires. And this is incredibly humbling experience because, again, I work in the sector of trying to get useful information out to the general public. And I want to rewind and kind of tell you the story of my experience of evacuating and going through the fire and keeping in mind around all the technology, that we're building. And I just want you to think about maybe what you do specifically while I tell you the experience of somebody who actually, had to use data in a crisis situation. So first, let's rewind. Hopefully this plays on its own. No. Is it possible to hit play? And sorry about that. There's quite a few videos that I want to show, but I wanted to show move-in day to our cottage, and I wanted to show the yard and our dogs maybe like running around. Hopefully the video plays. Okay. Well, anyway, just wanted to show you this little tour. Ironically, we've been living in this area for about 5 or 6 years, and because of a major road slide, we decided to move closer to the PCH. And that way my partner could actually commute to downtown a little bit more reliably. And I want you to see, this little cute cottage, and specifically, looking at the yard, we had these 2 beautiful, huge trees that kind of sat on either end of the yard. And there are my 2 dogs. They're also runners. That's Luna, Luna and Roca. Okay, and sorry, I'm going to be going back now. I do have quite a bit of videos, so hopefully some of them keep playing on their own. If not, I can help narrate. Okay, so that was our move-in day, and rewinding and going back to actually in December, this past AGU, I arrived in DC. I was very excited. I used to be a remote worker, by the way, even though I was based at NASA Goddard. I live in Los Angeles, so AGU this past year being in DC was great. I was really excited to connect with people, hear some hopefully familiar faces in the room. And I woke up in DC to about 10 missed calls from my partner and this photo that he had sent me on December 10th, letting me know that the Franklin fire had started and was coming straight for our property. And he had to leave and evacuate with our 2 dogs and go to my mother's house. I basically left AGU that morning to run home. I don't know why I thought getting home any sooner would help the situation. We were evacuated, but I just thought, I needed to be there, and obviously couldn't focus on the conference. And for the Franklin fire, again, this was December 10th, 2024, we had a super close call. It came within a quarter mile of our house. It burned 4,000 acres. But what was remarkable about the Franklin fire is so many structures were saved. There was very actual little destruction, and that gave a little bit of false sense of security, I think, for all of us in this area, because, again, the firefighters did such an amazing job protecting properties. And fast forward to just 3 weeks later, on January 6th, we received a ton of notifications, and it was PDS, red flag warning. And to be honest with you, I hadn't heard of the term PDS before. I went down a rabbit hole trying to learn when this kind of terminology began, but it stands for a particularly dangerous situation. I guess this is now, terminology that NWS has been using for the past 10 years. But we received notifications that there was going to be extremely high winds for the area. We were also experiencing incredibly dry conditions. We hadn't received any rainfall yet. And we were coming off of 2 really wet years, which means there was a lot of new growth and a lot of plant material that could be ignition for a potential fire. So we were already, on edge. And the winds, again, sorry if I can't play these videos, it's okay. This one's not super important, but January 7th is the day that the winds started really blowing. And the video here that would have been playing is a planter, and it's a 150-pound planter just shaking and being knocked over by the winds. So I was working from home, my partner's in his office, and I was sending him videos of just, man, they weren't kidding. The winds are super strong today. We hadn't seen something like that. And then a few hours later at 11 a.m., there was a fire ignition that started in the Palisades area. This is a shot that I took, again, just from our yard. It's another video of the smoke plume coming up. And of course, I had family and friends immediately starting to text because they knew we had a close call just a few weeks earlier. And these are my responses to my aunt and also my in-laws. I said, we're fine. It would have to burn hundreds, if not thousands of houses to reach us. And also, we thought we just had a close call. We had a bunch of vegetation burn on the other side of our house, even though it was coming from the other direction. We had an incredibly false sense of security. That afternoon and evening, I was glued to an app that kind of had a moment. It's called Watch Duty. And I had downloaded Watch Duty the first time for the December 10th fire, and I was really impressed as a data scientist person because all this app was doing was just showing all relevant data for you to make a decision during fires. It pushes updates on the fire perimeter. You get readouts of different firefighters, calling each other. You can actually see transcripts. You can see the wind direction. You can see local cameras set up. So you can actually, go in, click, see university-owned cameras to actually look at the fire itself. So I was glued to this. I was glued to the TV and waiting for updates. The issue, though, and what we came to learn in this fire and maybe why there's some errors in our assumptions of how useful an app like this could be, was the winds were so strong. They could not fly either planes or helicopters to fight the fire, but more importantly, that I learned to map the fire. So we rely on aerial shots to actually update fire perimeter information. Because the winds were so strong, they were not able to fight the fire or take new imagery. So for hours, we actually received no update of where the fire was in the perimeter. We received evacuation warnings. Those were pushed. We saw the evacuation warning heighten in intensity of, get ready to go, the neighborhoods that would be impacted. But we were most interested in looking at just the fire perimeter. And this is an example of I think, the power of Watch Duty. Again, this is a video footage that you could actually see from one of the ridges, where the fire was. And we're big runners, and so we know every single ridge. We know all of these cameras, so we have a good sense of spatial awareness, probably more than the average person, to actually also make use of this information. But still, no updates. Fast forward to 7 p.m. So if you live in a fire-prone area, one thing you also learn is if the power goes out, that's when you move. If the power's on, you're probably in good shape, is also what we figured. And even though we were warned that they might turn off the power preventively, it never happened until 7 p.m. at night. The power went out. We don't have cell phone reception where I live. I know that might sound crazy. You're in Los Angeles. This is a mountain community, though. I have no cell phone reception. So when the power goes out, I have no means of communicating with anybody. And it wasn't until 8 p.m. that we evacuated. It's because we saw the fire cresting over the ridge. All right, so this is a video also that I took when we were leaving. The fire was already coming over the ridge, and that's when we decided to leave. We were checking in with neighbors. Some had left earlier. Some people were still staying. And again, if you don't live in one of these regions, that might sound crazy, but people have a false sense of security. And also, quite honestly, some people would rather go down with their ships and stay and fight the fire for their houses. But this was an incredibly scary moment for us. And even though we had potentially information available, we didn't have the best information. And so when we left, we also just evacuated with basically our files and our dogs. We almost even took just one car. My partner jumped in my car and I was like, wait, what are you doing? I think we should take both cars, in case anything. But even that's how, kind of rushed and haphazard this was. We weren't really thinking. And again, we thought, "Ah, we're leaving for the night, and we'll be back tomorrow, just like the Franklin fire." All night, we were checking our phones. We evacuated to my mother's house, which is about an hour north, and the fire perimeter map was not updated for 12 hours. So that's how long people were waiting to figure out where the fire had gone, and realized that at this point, thousands of houses had already burned down, but nobody knew where the fire was. We were lucky in some sense that it was night, because then you could see the fire glowing. It's a little easier to tell where a fire it is actually in the evening. But for evacuation information, knowing what road you should take to leave, you need to know where the fire is to make that decision. And we didn't have that information available to us. Going now through the night, again, we are at my mother's house. I am compulsively checking watch duty, trying to understand what's going on. This is 2 a.m. You can see that this is the screenshots that I took of the time that I was awake. We evacuated around 9 p.m., and we think our house burned down around midnight, because this is the view from a camera from the closest ridge to us. This is Saddle Peak at around 2 a.m., and you can obviously see the fire had progressed past the ridge. And in that moment, we had started seeing early reports that the fire was potentially a little patchy. So even if it had burned an area, your home could still be there. And you're just trying to hold out hope, right? You just don't want to imagine a world where you just lost everything. And I started having neighbors text me, and try to coordinate and say, hey, hopefully our little canyon's okay. This is me responding. And I'm saying, hey, it looks like the fire actually burned through our canyon. And she's asking me, do you have any idea if our houses are safe? Ironically, we lived on the same street as the fire department. We were just a single street going up the mountain. And so we all had hope that if anyone's going to make it through us, it's our street. We have a fire station at the bottom of our block. And I started sending and realizing, what I could do in this moment, what my skill set is I can try to get this data and give it to my neighbors, right? Like I work in remote sensing. I know indices from imagery that I could calculate to tell where the burn area is. I'm familiar with NASA FIRMS, which is fire information. And I started sharing this, with my neighbors. And I tried to explain what this image is, which this is the NASA FIRMS satellite imagery showing at least just the thermal temperatures, clearly indicating that, the area had at least been burned, but not useful to tell you whether or not your house is still there or not. I started getting more desperate. So this is 24 hours later, and I started getting messages and also reaching out to my friends in private satellite companies that I'm not going to name, but this is a good friend of mine who works for a private satellite imagery provider. And, just saying, is there anything I can do? And I told this person, I was like, actually, I am right now trying to purchase data from Up 42. So I can analyze it myself and be able to tell my neighbors and myself if our house has made it or not. And I was basically asking, like, did your company, take any image, any high resolution image? And they said, let me check. I'm going to get back to you. 48 hours later, they get back to me and say, we have an image. Your property line is just at the edge, but unfortunately, it's not in our open data program, so I can't share it with you. But I can check for you. And again, how much privilege do I have that I get a direct communication link of like, here's my address. Can you tell me if my house burned down? And still actually not even able to get that information out of it. How we found out our place burned down was because the app Nextdoor, which as much drama and silly that app is really helpful during the fires, because we randomly had someone who decided to fly a drone the next day and then post drone imagery, which is very illegal, by the way. But people were sending messages nonstop saying, does anyone have eyes on this property? Has anyone been able to go back to this street? This person flew a drone. And in that first video, when I was giving you the tour, I wanted to point out, my tree in my yard. And I have it circled here. So let me see. This is that tree, the two trees. And you clearly see something smoldering there, right? And as also just a testament of how patchy this fire was, you see other structures, other homes totally okay. But for this one, you couldn't quite see. This is our neighbor's cottage, which is totally intact. So even though I saw this drone image, I still had hope. I'm just like, maybe it's smoke coming from somebody else's property. But it wasn't until the same day, the same morning that that drone image was shot, a neighbor also illegally went back through our neighborhood and started taking videos and sent me this video, confirming that everything had been lost. We ended up going back a month later. This is okay. This is also going to be another video of me kind of giving you a tour post the fire and also for insurance reasons. This is just the Palisades fire I was talking about. Obviously, there was also the Eaton fire going on at the same time, which I think has an even more terrible story in terms of impact on the local community for socioeconomic regions. But for this Palisades fire, in the end, 23,000 acres were burned, 1,200 homes lost, and 12 people died, just in this fire. And one of the reasons why we were not able to go back for a few extra weeks than anybody else to our property was because they had unconfirmed that somebody had passed away on our street. And, to be honest, that was one of the most guilt-ridden times of, thinking I was evacuating. I had a lot of elderly neighbors that I did know, luckily, that I was able to, be in contact with, but I didn't know every single neighbor. And we were a pretty small street, and we were a street with maybe like 30 houses, but I didn't have everybody's contact info. I didn't know who was home. And unlike previous fires, where you sometimes get policemen and firemen actually coming to your door, nobody came and knocked, which, again, sounds like you should just leave, but people, had just been falsely given hope with the Franklin fire, and I can absolutely see how some people maybe just went to bed that night thinking everything was fine. Fast forward to a few days, after the fire, after we had gotten confirmation that we lost our house, I wrote a very grief-written LinkedIn post of just trying to channel my frustrations, and I basically asked, when our community burned, where was the satellite information? And I wanted to write it soon so I could remember everything that I was doing to try to get information. And, the takeaway was I have a PhD in remote sensing, right? This time I was still working at NASA, like one of the data centers providing some of this. I also have experience in private sector where I have seen amazing technology, right? Like Star Wars-esque. At this point in time, you can see like a real-time video feed from space of Earth. I know about SAR, right? SAR is supposed to also be this great technology that we can see at night through clouds in fire situations. And none of that helped me in the moment. I ended up, focusing, I think, a lot on this post-fire assessment focus of like wanting to know whether or not my house burned down. But most importantly, during the evacuation and the real-time disaster, like we didn't have the information to also make good decisions. And I was really disappointed, as a community, as somebody who's spent so far my career in satellite remote sensing under the hope that this is a great way to democratize, information and help people, and feeling like it wasn't there to help. So I asked really genuine questions, for private satellite data providers. Did anybody turn their satellites, after ignition? These fires lasted 3 or 4 days, right? So it's also not like this was just a few hour scenario. Is there any information provided in real time? And if it is, what are the mechanisms that you're using to actually get that information to the public? And beyond just open data licensing issues, which I, immediately ran up against, even the free data from, NASA, NOAA, firms is updated every 4 hours. Okay, so in real time, there is some usefulness to that, and you do need, even minute by minute updates for some situations. And so the great thing about this, post was that it really had a lot of engagement. I had a lot of people asking really great questions and bringing up really great points. But overall, I heard other stories of people sharing how, it felt like technology, had kind of failed them in these moments. And even if the data was there, like, what are we going to do? Build disaster-specific dashboards? Like Watch Duty had a moment, and it's fire-themed. 2 weeks later, we did have rainstorms come through, and then we had mudslides. There's no app for mudslides. So what do we actually expect the general public to do to know 20 different apps, depending on your disaster, depending on your region, to then go and get information. I don't think that's the way forward. Especially, in the niche things that I do, we also love to emphasize, the power of the cloud and scalability and making things faster and more efficient. But we're really out of touch if we can't get the data, to people who actually need it in the first place in disaster situations. So for me, like, the takeaway of this experience was technology felt that it had failed me, but what I realized is that my community, did not. And it's going to be hard to not get a little emotional right now, because I do want to share ways that, like, even this ESIP community held me, and like the open source community held me. First, my colleagues at Goddard, at Justice, they're the ones that actually set up a GoFundMe for me and my family. And it's really hard, I'm really happy that we have this conference. It's really hard not to see them in this room, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that more. Also, people were asking, like, what can we do? And if you know me, also, I was really proud of my library, and I had coworkers and friends start sending me books, because that was one thing that I actually was really sad about losing, was all of my book collection. People send me secondhand books, but now I cherish so much. It makes me feel connected. And these are my coworkers sending me books. And also, I mentioned I'm a runner. When you do those sort of really silly 100-mile races, you get a belt buckle, and they mean a lot to you because you fight a lot for that. And my belt buckle is all burnt, and a race director found out and sent me, my belt buckle, which also is just a really beautiful gift. I had, other kind of trinkets and trophies that I lost, and people commissioned to have remade for me. And so this experience was, if nothing, a great lesson on learning how my community, helped me feel resilient in these times. And when I go back to that definition of resilience, the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties, I've just told you a story that's really focused around climate resilience, but resiliency is also really applicable for us right now in terms of political and financial situations. And I want to directly address, the elephant in the room right now, which is, I'm very grateful that ESIP's happening, and we're also missing a lot of faces in this room right now from our federal friends. And it's really hard. It's hard to accept this, but we are forced to now ask ourselves, how can we become more resilient? And we didn't probably think we were going to be in this situation, but resilience in the face of not being able to rely potentially on our federal government is absolutely a question, that we should all be asking, independent of what we're doing. So I want to kind of leave off with some lessons and metaphors from the fire, and also little tidbits of where I see kind of things going in good directions or bad directions. And I think there's metaphors to what we're experiencing with our own industry and what we see with kind of the pulling out of our federal government in some of these efforts. So I think the first lesson that I would highlight is you should really prioritize knowing your neighbors and building a very literal local community. I teach climate resilience, and if you read any of those textbooks, that's the first thing that you're supposed to do, is come up with a resource list of what are your skill sets, what are your neighbors' skill sets, because in times of emergency, that's all you really have is your neighbors. And I think that's, a direct metaphor to what we should be doing in our work life situations right now. I absolutely think that we should be focusing on meeting other people as fully other people, not just by your job titles or your companies, but taking that lesson and not just applying it to your own personal homes and neighbors, but applying it to this room is going to make you a lot more resilient in these times. The second thing I feel like we aren't great at is sharing stories and listening to stories. We really focus, and I tend to be in a bubble of people working on really amazing advanced tech, to try to get data out there. But the power of storytelling, that's what really sticks with us and people who are not in this industry. And a few examples I had from this experience was, befriending an elderly neighbor who had lived in the same canyon for over 30 years. And she was the first person who told me the story of the 1992 Topanga fire that burned through the same neighborhood, the same pattern, that we had seen in the Palisades. and 2 of her neighbors lost their lives, trying to evacuate. Hearing that story, even though I'm a data person and I live in a fire-prone region, I had never, gone back and looked at historical fire maps. Like, honestly, who does that? Maybe when you purchase a property, you're going to do that due diligence or work with an insurance company to give you that information. But my first orientation and awareness of where I'm living was from an elderly neighbor telling me stories about previous fires and hearing what they did to navigate through that. I also think, the knowledge that we get from indigenous cultures, right? We don't listen to those stories. We don't share those stories. Ceremonial burns were an incredible part of our ecosystem that made indigenous communities resilient to these situations, and we don't practice that. We call those controlled burns. It's very rarely done. There's a lot of risk associated with that. I'm not a fire expert. I'll let other fire experts in the room maybe talk to why that's the case. But I think if we have to share those stories of what older communities did to be able to be actually resilient. And then the last thing is the biggest impact actually comes from people closest to the scenarios. And I also experienced firsthand, dealing with FEMA. That was my first time dealing, with the federal branch of FEMA. And I absolutely understood after dealing with that entity why the general public might have a sense of apathy towards the federal government. I had to go, and when I was going back to the property, I went to our local center to get the full suit, right? Get clearance to be able to enter my property. And I had to deal with local policemen, local entities, and we were all crying, we were hugging, we had all just experienced this trauma together. They, gave me information to go to a different center to actually get specific tools so I could help sift. And it was the same thing, it was our community members who were there. The last booth at the end of the table was FEMA. And, they were there to be able to collect your information and help you file. And it was the most cold experience, right? Like, they didn't live through that. And it just felt like this wall. And it kind of opened the door for me to see, again, this like apathy that I know we all in this room don't have. I think we're all big believers in government, and we want government to, be this entity that helps us in these situations. But I could start to see, why people feel this way. And I think the parallel is in our industry is that, we focus and we've tried to do vertical integration where, we have satellite companies putting up satellites, and they're also trying to be the ones to, sell a product to help a situation. But you can't scale a lot of these solutions, right? A lot of these solutions, you need local knowledge and local information to actually have an impact. So I think we take sometimes the wrong approach. I have, additional, I think, interesting resources that I would share just from teaching resilience. This is a really interesting toolkit, the U.S. Climate Resiliency Toolkit, which gives you a ton of steps if you wanted to become a climate practitioner. And I think one of the coolest graphics that I saw, in this tool is the spectrum of community engagement to ownership, where I really think, any project that you're working on, rating yourself on this spectrum in terms of how well you are integrating local communities and voices is really helpful tool. And understanding that that's what we should probably be focused on. It's maybe not all of our expertise, but rating yourself on this curve, I think, is also kind of enlightening in your projects. I also use this textbook, Climate Resilience, How We Keep Each Other Safe, Care for Our Communities, because it has a ton of great success stories. 2 examples of what they do, of what it teaches, is something called community resilience mapping and disaster collectivism. And I just want to, read this passage very quickly, but it says, communities must consciously commit to the collective good amid crisis, or else it's very possible that the quintessential American value of individualism will win out. Communities are much likelier to do so if they've been exercising collective muscles and cultivating relationships long before disaster strikes. And I want to give an example really quickly of where I see potentially individualism winning out in this situation. This is really big in the news right now because we had the presence of a lot of private firefighters. This again is Palisades, Malibu. It's a really affluent community. People can't afford their own private firefighters. And obviously people are up in arms about the idea of that. And I want to show an image I think is really impactful. This is the Palisades, post-fire, which is absolutely, decimated. But if you zoom in, you will see a certain shopping center called the Palisades Village that survived. And it survived because a really rich person who also ran for mayor paid private firefighters during this fire to go out and protect his private property. And the irony of this to me is that who are you going to sell anything to when the entire neighborhood is decimated? This is all either cleared lots or burnt lots. And we don't want that, right? We don't want individualism winning out. I don't think the solution is to privatize everything, including a fire department. I do have, counterexamples of showing the opposite of where we are leaning into the community. One of them is in Topanga Canyon. We actually had a local volunteer fire brigade who fought back the fire successfully, by the way. Topanga Canyon was almost unscathed because of this community-led approach, and it was people on the ground who had already been trained to volunteer to fight fires, but they really understood, local resources and local techniques to try to fight it. We see different initiatives coming up where people are interested now in adobes and natural materials, into rebuilding their houses. If you drive through the area, there is tertiary disasters going on right now because we have all of this debris running off into our oceans. We're having a really incredibly terrible situation right now for local water quality because we don't use eco-friendly building materials, and now our oceans are suffering as it's being washed out into the ocean. But we see people, reconsidering their materials. We also have for first time, allowing tribal communities to come back and do ceremonial burns. This is not specific to the Palisades region, but this was a success story this past February in Northern California. And we also have more ground-up initiatives. I wanted to highlight the Living Infrastructure Field Kit. I'm running out of time, but just as an example of an organization that's Los Angeles focused, that is actually going out to the community and engaging with the community, and then trying to build tools to actually help people either apply for funding for climate resiliency projects. They have a really interesting card deck that I can leave up here of just information cards that they bring out to public meetings, not anything specific for climate, but they'll ask questions like, what does it mean for places to be alive? They gather that information, and then they're trying to, build tools which, yes, are integrating, being a one-stop shop for using this data, but also a place for you to more practically build out resilience projects. The last thing I wanted to maybe bring it back to, because I did share, a personal part of me, and that is that I'm a runner. This fire impacted me in many ways, not just losing our home, but this is my Strava heat map for people who know that app. You can map your runs and your bike rides. That's my heat map versus the burn area. We really lost for a while the reason why we're up here to begin with, right? We live here to enjoy the trails, and it was really hard to digest that our local trail system was also absolutely decimated. And when it comes to trying to figure out how I can have a bigger impact, this is a community that I feel really involved in. And I tried to make that bridge on climate information and bringing it maybe to a group of people that aren't used to dealing with it. And one way I've found this is I've partnered up with different organizations and tried to basically redo their maps that we have for races and integrate climate information into the maps. And so if you do a 100-mile race, you're really reliant on some navigation to be able to do that. And we put out these maps and actually show local fires that happened. We show how the average temperature is increasing when this race is occurring for the past 30 years. And that's much more tangible thing that people can then actually relate and understand how climate change is impacting a sport that they love. So in bringing it back from innovation to impact, I think these are incredible questions that ESIP staff have put together. And especially, trying to understand how we're using this data to empower communities. I think there's a fundamental question of asking, is the data getting to the people who actually need it? I think the answer is we're not entirely there yet. And we need to, center ourselves on understanding what resilience is right now in all aspects, right? Climate, financial, political. We are being put in a situation that we're being tested, right? And there are technical innovations that can help this. I'm really excited for the technical sessions right now. All right, we need continued research to better understand extremes, right? I'm a metadata person, I'm a metadata geek. I know that metadata is the key to be able to make data co-location and distribution easier. We need that better metadata to make AI an actual useful tool. I'm all for the technological advancements, but we are missing, just the basics if data isn't getting to people in crisis scenarios. There are success stories and lessons we can learn from like WatchDuty or Redfin, if you ever use that app, is also pretty good at telling you climate risk for potential properties that you're interested in. But technology alone isn't going to solve the problem. And I think listening to each other, reconnecting is a way to be more resilient, and we need that as a complementary tool to the technology that we're building. The last image that I have here is just from 2 weeks ago. This is a run with my dog, and I wanted to show how resilient nature is, right? So the burn area for the houses is still completely decimated. It's so depressing driving on PCH right now. It's gonna be decades, honestly, I think, until that looks normal. But you know what already looks normal is our local trails and hills. Like, the green is already coming back. And it's such a testament of what we can learn, I think, from nature in terms of resilience that, my original paranoia of we lost all of our local trail systems is actually not true. Like, this is a fire area. We have to learn how to coexist with it. And, the nature is coming back. And I think there's a lot of lessons and reflections in that. Oh, yeah, thank you, everyone.
That talk was everything I knew it would be. Thank you so much. The parallels, the connections between what you've experienced and nature and individuals and community, there's so many lessons. And I am delighted that Brianna will be here throughout the week. I think she's in at least 5 other sessions. I feel like I saw your name all over Sched. So you will be able to connect with her this week. We didn't put the Slido QR code up, so it's not already populated with a million questions that you have. Here is the Slido QR code for both those online and in the room. Please go put your questions there. We're gonna have Xander Wang come and speak, and then we'll do questions for both of them at the end. So let us know who your question is for, so it'll be easier for us to get it to the right person. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Xander Wang, this year's AGU ESIP Falkenberg Award winner.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you so much, Brianna, for sharing the real story behind the scene. This is really powerful. Sorry for what you have experienced. I remember that day I actually traveling to San Francisco, visiting UC Berkeley, and saw this news. I was shocked. I think this shouldn't happen, in kind of a resilient world. So anyway, it's so great to be here. My name is Xander Wang. I'm coming from the smallest province of Canada. It's called Prince Edward Island. I should do a little bit of advertising on behalf of our government. If you're fed up and you want to have a break, visit us. And they actually provide free access to all national parks and beaches in PEI. So you're welcome to visit us. Anyway, so today I'm going to share some of the stories or some of the research projects we have been working on for the past 15 years. But I would like to start with some questions I hope you can participate in. I have basically 3 simple questions. These are all yes or no questions. Here is a QR code. Thank you so much to Alicia and Aaron to put this up. And if you can simply scan, use your mobile phone, and then I think we do have. Yeah. So the first question, basically, I want to ask you to participate in is just to get a sense. How many of you have experienced climate change-related events? For example, wildfires, floods, droughts, heat waves, sea level rise, or shrinking sea ice coverage. Maybe this is not the case in the United States. Changing climate patterns, and so on. You name it. So any kind of events. If you have experienced that, simply You can put yes or no. Or if you're not sure, that's totally fine. And we'll probably give people a few seconds so that we can see the answers popping up. I think, yeah, seems like we always saying yes. It's so bad, but that's the reality. It's happening, right? It's really happening everywhere. So then we're going to jump into the next question. Are you aware of any climate change risk that your local communities or even yourselves might be facing in the near future? Maybe at this moment, do you haven't experienced anything, but in the near future, are you aware of any? Same like wildfire or droughts or flooding. Again, yes or no questions. And you can simply put your answer in. Let's see. Yeah, seems like we have some people sharing, like providing answer unsure or no, which means certainly there's still some work to do, right? Okay, and the final question I would like to ask, do you think your local communities or even yourself are fully prepared for these kind of risks, if you are aware of that? It can be something like you probably already take some actions, to prevent, the potential risk, or maybe if you are willing to do so in the near future, that's okay too, right? If this is the case, simply say yes. Let's see what is the answer. Yeah, and you can see this time we probably have a little bit more people, provide an answer. Yeah, no. Sorry, surprising. I think we have more people sharing, choosing the somehow, which means you're probably not aware of that. Or maybe so you realize a lot of work to do in the near future. So that's basically, you can see, I provide these three simple questions, in a specific sequence. Because eventually we want to link to your local communities. Why we want to do that? Because that's the real challenge when it comes to real climate action. So we have heard about a lot of government declaring a climate emergency, but we really barely see some tangible actions, right? So if you look at these two pictures, this one side you are seeing this melting, shrinking sea ice coverage in the Arctic, and the other side you probably see a beautiful house sitting on the top of a mountain. If you are the owner of this house, and I come to you and say, can you do something like towards the shrinking sea ice coverage in the Arctic? What is your reaction? It's not in my backyard, right? So that's basically what we are seeing so far. Everybody maybe every day turn on the news, you will see a lot of news about climate change. You see something is happening, but it's not in your community. It's remote. So that's why we're kind of a little behind to take some real actions. So therefore, it's so important to put this into the local context. And here, I just want to quickly show you this figure showing 5 stages of health behavior change, typically for human beings. And it includes 5 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, and preparation, action, and maintenance. And the most important part of these 5 stages is actually the transition from stage 1 to stage 2. In other words, awareness to unawareness to awareness. Okay, if you're not aware of something, you probably read something which is probably remote from you, and you may ignore that or maybe smiling because it's not related to me somehow. Right? It's just news. And if you notice something is happening in your local community, I believe you will change your attitude. Okay, if you heard something happen to your local community, you probably will double check this news, and at some point you probably feel shocked, and eventually you will take some action. So I think that's really important. So that's what we have been doing in the past 15 years to really raise the public awareness of climate change, because this is a fundamentally important step to real action. So next, I'm going to show you an interdisciplinary research program we have been working towards a climate-smart future. So it has 6 pillars, but because of timing, I want to be able to go through all of them. But I will quickly go through each pillar, and next I'm going to give you some examples. So the first one is high-resolution climate modeling. And the idea for this is to provide high-resolution future climate data to local communities. So you know what would be the future temperature, precipitation, humidity, wind speed for your local community. You don't want to overreact or underreact. You need to know exactly what would happen. And the second, it's more about flooding. Flooding is becoming one of the major challenges we have been facing for Canada, United States, or around the world. And how do we make sure we kind of deal with that? Number three, climate resilient communities. Here in Seattle, this is the coastal communities. I come from east coast of Canada. It's a small island. The coastal community is facing a lot of issues: sea level rise, coastal erosion, intensive storm events. How to make sure the society is resilient enough? Climate smart agriculture. This is mainly about food. Everything we eat today, it's heavily relying on agricultural activities, but we know agricultural activities are related to climate change. Everything is depending on that. And sometimes we may also experience some disruptions for food supply system too. Number five, climate change and health. As Brianna shared, climate change can cause a lot of physical damages, but also, mental stress too. And this is not only about human beings. Sometimes we also face a lot of issues for our bioecosystems, animals, plants. How do we really address this with one plan, or planetary health advocacy? And finally, climate change mitigation and adaptation. This is a very broad area, but one side we also need to address mitigation. In the meantime, we need to take some immediate action to make sure we can survive, our communities can survive in the context of the climate change, which is already happening. Okay, so next I'm going to show you some of research projects. And one thing we kind of deal with high resolution climate modeling, it's really to use high performance computing cluster, because when you run regional climate models, it takes a lot of time to get the work done. So we're so fortunate to get access to the HPC cluster to get work done. But the important part, today I'm not going to talk about technical or research details. It's more about the idea to make sure we can share results with the general public to help increase the general public awareness of climate change. So what we do is that once we have data, we share this with the general public with no charge. And one thing is make sure that it's free and it's easy to use. So we have developed some climate change data portals, including Canada CCDP, China CCDP, Ontario CCDP, Prairie CCDP. These data portals, they provide these GIS maps. You can click on that individual grid cell to get data until the end of this century. And you will get a sense of what would be the future climate for your local communities. So this is a user statistics for climate change data portal. We have received a lot of users over the past decade. But today I'm mostly we'll talk about some of the work we have done for the province of Prince Edward Island. This is a small province, a small island, which you can see the shape of this island. One thing we have done is to really establish an island-wide climate monitoring system so everybody can see what's going on with the current climate. These are based on real-time, physically installed weather stations across the island. At peak time, we have over 100 weather stations. It's a small island, but at some point, you do see variations when it comes to temperature, precipitation, wind speed. We also have this climate atlas. That is basically to provide people some high-resolution map for past 50 years so that they can get a sense about the spatial temporal patterns of the local climate. Like PEI, one thing is famous about potato. We actually produce a lot of potato and export to the United States. And potato farmers are heavily relying on this kind of pattern to decide where they want to grow potato because it's pretty much rain-fed. And we also have storm surge early warning system. So this is when you live in coastal cities, coastal communities, storm surge is a big concern, like during every hurricane seasons. And we were hit by Hurricane Fiona in 2022 directly. So that was a historical event for PEI. And we were fortunate to establish this early warning system before that, so that actually it hit the north shore of PEI. We actually captured all the storm surge in the North Shore area. And ecosystem carbon flux app, this is basically to give you a sense, you click on each individual polygon across PEI, we have different ecosystems, then you can get a sense about the average carbon flux. So if there's a clear cut, you probably will see more carbon emissions from that area. Climate diary, this is based on citizen science and climate phrenology. The idea behind that is to make sure everybody can participate in. For example, if you see a bird coming, or maybe Canada goose coming earlier back to to the north in spring, which means the temperature is probably getting warmer than before. So this is kind of an indication of climate change. So we basically allow people to tell us what do you see first time and where you see that, and you put into the system so that we can track the change over time to understand climate change locally. But the most important part of the work we have done in the past few years is this PEI Climate Hazard and Risk Information System. In short, we call this as CRIS. And it basically provides a comprehensive GIS and web-based tool to allow the general public and decision makers to explore climate-related hazards and information for the whole province of PEI. And particularly, we include 3 kinds of information. One is coastal erosion. So basically, because the island is actually shrinking on average 30 centimeters or a foot a year. So that's basically something information people need to get. Coastal flooding, because it's so low-lying, we have a lot of beautiful beaches, but it's so low-lying, so we are facing a lot of issues when it comes to coastal flooding. And inland flooding too. So this is about everybody. You have a house, you probably want to worry about basement flooding or maybe some flooding caused by heavy rainfall. So we produce 1 meter resolution island-wide inland flood map for the whole province. And this is the user interface. And since we launched last March, so far we have received over 14,000 users from the province of PEI. The total population in the PEI is about 160, so it's almost 10% people using that. So to give you a sense about some of the useful function for this platform, one is that this side you can actually zoom into a specific property. I'm not sure you can see the green line. This is property boundary line. And you can click on individual property, get a property ID. If you are buying this property, definitely you can get a sense about the potential risk. And this is a 1 meter flooding map. You can see this road will be flooded. And we also provide a lot of tools. You can measure the distance and area of flooded, maybe backyard. If you're owner of this property, you will get a sense. Actually, the insurance company are also using that app to do a lot of assessment. The other side is basically we kind of did a lot of work behind the scene. We consider the whole road network for island. We consider all the fire stations, hospitals, and all the buildings so that we can identify those buildings will be directly flooded or indirectly isolated because you may lose access to the main road, to the hospital, to fire station because the main road is flooded. Which means during this emergency situation, you will lose access to emergency rescue. Or maybe some big areas will be totally isolated and you probably want to avoid going to those areas. So these are some useful information people can get directly. We also have all the coastal lines. We divide this into small segments. You can click on individual segments to get a sense about the average coastal erosion rate and also coastal flooding map along with that. And most importantly, recently, we kind of hired a small airplane to fly along with the coastal line and take a lot of oblique photos for the coastal line. And you can click on individual dots to get all the photos for this coastal line. And this is to really put something into visual so that you know what it looks like for a coastal line in PEI. And to make sure it's available to everybody. It's free, it's totally free. No registration required, and it's available for any devices. And you only need to make sure you have internet access, a web browser. That's it. And we designed this to make sure everybody can use that with a smartphone, tablets, laptop, computer, and you can even try it out if you have an internet connection here. Next, I'm going to quickly go through the major challenges we are facing as a small island, coastal erosion. So these are some photos showing you above, these are before, and bottom after Hurricane Fiona in 2022. So these are beautiful, sand dunes in the national park in Brackley Beach in PEI. And after Fiona, we did our measurement. We lost about 10 meters of sand dune because of, one event. And further photos showing the damaged coastal line and key infrastructure. These are the highways which kind of almost, I believe it's actually flooded because of, Fiona. There are a lot of damages caused by Fiona. So really to help with that, help address this issue, we are building a research program which is to help increase coastal resilience to climate change for PEI. So we look at high resolution climate modeling, coastal inland flood modeling, coastal erosion monitoring, modeling, and risk assessment, and finally coastal protection measures and adaptation pathways, because eventually we need to take some actions. So in order to support this program, we need a very critical research infrastructure, which we call coastal hazard monitoring, modeling, and a testing system. Because of timing, we will not go through all the details, but generally speaking, we have monitoring system, we have modeling system, we also have testing system, so that eventually we can help people identify some real protection measures when it comes to coastal erosion. One of the key infrastructure within this is a lab-scale coastal inland flood simulation and demonstration platform. And this is something that we kind of developed, designed about 5 years ago, and we realized there was no such thing in the market to simply for us to buy. So it turns out we have to fabricate that from nothing. And eventually, last year, we got this in. And this is a real system. You have a big water tank underneath, and above you have a transparent water tank. You can generate ocean wave. You have open area in the middle. You have coastal line. You can switch that. And above, you have a rainfall generator. So next, hopefully this will work. I will show you a video. I'm not sure it will be working. Oh, I'm not sure. Let's go back. I'm not sure. Aaron, is that possible to play that? Or? Let me just go. Seems not. It's an image? All right. I think that's fine. I'll probably just go back to talk a little bit about that. Okay. I think next. Yeah. Okay. All right. Why it's popping? Okay. So basically, we can control a wave generator to really. We can control the wave generator and also rainfall intensity. And there's a stormwater system. If you walk on the street, there are always some complicated pipes underneath the street. That is the stormwater system designed to mitigate flooding in urban areas. We have that included in that system. And for the coastal line, you actually can change this from like a smooth beach to a cliff, or maybe to some breakwaters to test out different coastal protection measures. This is something that for us to really moving forward in the lab setting, if we identify some protection measures, we can do a lab testing, and then moving forward, we can actually go to we can actually go to. Let me see, this is working or not. No. So. Basically, eventually we can go to the, we are working with the provincial government to identify some provincial parks to set up some, real world testing for these kind of protection measures. And we do also monitoring to really get a sense if this is working or not in a real environment. This is kind of step-by-step, process to really move towards real actions when it comes to coastal protections. But we know that in different locations, different communities, we're actually facing really different issues. It's really important to make sure local people are aware of their local issues. You're not talking about people who are facing wildfire, and then you talk about coastal erosion. And you need to make sure that this is really matching to what they see, because eventually you need to make sure they are taking actions which are protecting their own communities. So anyway, I think that's something I want to share. Finally, I would just quickly acknowledge the team behind the scene. This is a global map showing our climate smart members all around the world. One thing I want to mention that they're actually coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Civil engineering, hydrology, GIS, remote sensing, social, mental health, applied human health, all kinds of fields. I feel so privileged to work with all of them. These are some group photos, and we have a website which is available at climatesmartlab.ca. If you learn more details, you can visit that. And then I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Xander. We are running a little behind time, but I know that you would all feel really cheated if I didn't give you any time for questions. So if we could pull up the Slido QR code for another minute, see if we have any questions already in there, and we'll take at least 1 or 2 questions for each of them. While we're pulling that up, I will give us just a reminder, after this we have our coffee break. It is a 1-hour coffee break, so if I steal a little from that for Q&A, I think you'll forgive me. And then we go into our breakout sessions. We have at lunch, we have birds of a feather, so if you have some topics that you want to talk with people about, we have signs, you can put those on a table, make your lunch interactive in that way. Okay, is the QR code available to be seen? Let's see. And then don't forget, we have the newcomer meet and greet at 1 o'clock today and the baseball game tonight at the Mariners T-Mobile Stadium. So QR code's now back up online. Vote up questions because we'll only have time for a couple. I'll start with the first one. Xander, have you tracked which user groups are accessing your web tools for risk assessment like Chris? Residents, local government, staff, others?
Well, I would say all kinds of users. Just give you a sense, insurance company are using that, and we have actually a beautiful oceanfront restaurant, and the owner decided to move that a few weeks ago because the insurance company checked out our map showing that this property is right in the flooding zone. And the owner also checked that. Finally, everybody agreed that we should move. Otherwise, the insurance company will not cover that. But we have government agencies, we have local residents. Some people, they even reach out to us to say, can you modify the map because my property is in your flooding zone. This is affecting my property value. So all kinds of users. Fortunately, I didn't get sued yet. So
let's see. Since it's been voted up, so Brianna, what can we use beside Nextdoor to build local community?
I mean, that's a question I'm hoping we can discuss here, It was, I wanted also give an asterisk to my presentation of yeah, it's funny how we're in this advanced tech bubble and I'm about to show you a bunch of screenshots from a bunch of random apps, and those random apps were what was most helpful for me in real time. And so I can't say I was on the main NASA firm's landing page. I can't tell you that was the first place I went to try to get information. So somewhere in between Nextdoor and a NASA data distribution website, there's hopefully some middle ground that people in this room can help envision what that looks like.
Yeah. I have to say, in listening to your talk, I mean, there have been so many times when I felt like I've been in your shoes, not in that dire of a situation, where I was like, I know this data exists. I know the people who know this data exists, but I can't find it in the moment. And so you are much more technically savvy than me, so the fact that you couldn't find it, it just shows me the work we have to do, right? And I'm glad that we have the data lifecycle cluster, the wildfires cluster, but it seems like we need a cluster for every different disaster, right? So how do we as a community organize better to build those supports? I gotta go with the next question up there for you. Oh, wait, it went to the top. But how are you doing? How is your community and neighborhood doing? And then we'll go into the top question at the top.
Yeah, thank you for proposing that. It's very sweet. I'm doing a lot better. And originally I evacuated an hour north, like I said, with my mom. We decided to actually go back, and we're now renting something in the same community because that's how strongly we feel about this community. And it's like our time to try to come together. And I know we could more easily, quite literally, run away and go somewhere else right now, but I really want to figure this out, and so does the rest of the community, of how do we coexist. Like, people who live here, we're not mad about the fire. Like, fires happen. We're mad about, old decisions on building materials and not understanding how to help each other. And so it is this chance to try to come back. So I'm doing a lot better, and I feel a lot more invigorated, I guess, on focusing locally. And I think in the beginning of my presentation, I said, originally I worked at a local water department. It felt really apathetic that I was just changing out toilets. But honestly, I look back and I'm like, I would rather have that kind of impact at this point. I would rather help people live a more sustainable life nearby me and not just focus on the big global stuff.
It's tough, the global pull and the local impact. I feel the same. So I'm going to end with this next question. So you noticed that some data was not in open data, so not available to the public. Is there something we can do to get that provider or providers in general to have data public?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if there's any folks from Humanitarian OpenStreetMaps here. There are orgs that are much more fluent in understanding disaster response scenarios, and there are disasters charters, there are policies that we can enact as nations, as communities, that would basically start a system of command where we can then acquire and purchase for the public good from these private providers. Obviously, my rosy view of this, my ideal world is, I think data is a right. I think, environmental data should be considered a common good. I think all of that should be made open and freely accessible. I respect the private entities trying to sell this, but I do think it's really interesting that for this fire, the disasters charter was not turned on. And so there are mechanisms to work with private entities to get this data. I don't know if satellite data is the solution, to be honest. In real time, I'm not sure we're there yet. So maybe that for that specific use case in really urgent scenarios, it's not going to be satellite data, it's going to be other data. But I do think this is a governance and, again, more of a policy conversation that we have to have as a community of, okay, a disaster is happening. There are a lot of private players in this. How do we get them to play nicely right now and make this data open?
Yep, great. So I'm gonna stop the questions there. I know there are many more great questions. For those of you here in person, we'll move into the coffee break, and I'm sure you can grab both of them over coffee. For those of you online, we'll look to get the questions to them and see if there's a way that we can get those answers back out to you. A big round of applause for our speakers. Okay.